You know that feeling. It's a Tuesday afternoon. You are just staring at your screen, trying to finish up a project, and a little notification pops up.
Oh, no.
Right? It's a calendar invite, or maybe just a direct message from a colleague or your manager. And it says something incredibly vague like, hey, do you have 5 minutes to chat?
That is honestly the absolute worst. I mean, it is a universal trigger for anxiety.
Immediately, your stomach just drops. Your mind starts racing. You're suddenly sweating, reviewing literally everything you've done for the past 6 months.
You're like, wait, did I send that email? Did I mess up that report?
Exactly. We all know that feeling of dread when a tough conversation is looming at work. But here's the thing. It is just as bad, if not worse, when you are the one who has to initiate that conversation.
Oh, 100%. It's terrifying.
Because, you need to tell a colleague they aren't pulling their weight, or that their attitude is completely tanking the team's morale. Or, in the absolute worst-case scenario, you have to deliver the news that they're losing their job.
And because we dread initiating that conflict so much, human nature just sort of takes over. We tend to do one of two things.
Right.
We either avoid the conversation entirely, just sweeping it under the rug, or we completely botch it because we let our own nerves and, adrenaline take the wheel.
Exactly. So, what do you actually say when you get in that room? And more importantly, how do you say it so that the other person actually hears you?
That's the real challenge.
It is. And that is our mission for this deep dive. We are going through a comprehensive communication guide and behavioral framework, one that's designed specifically for handling difficult workplace scenarios confidently.
Yeah, and I want to point out, this isn't just about managing other people. It's basically a playbook for your own professional survival.
It really is.
Yeah.
I mean, the research we're looking at today fundamentally changes the mechanics of how we approach conflict. It takes all the guesswork out of these really high-stakes moments.
It gives you a structure, which is what we usually lack when we panic.
Okay, let's unpack this. Why do we avoid these talks in the first place? I was thinking about this, and it feels exactly like ignoring a check engine light on your car.
Oh, that's a perfect analogy.
Right, because you see it pop up on the dashboard and you think, well, the car's still moving, it sounds fine. If I just ignore it, maybe it'll turn off by itself.
But of course, it never turns off.
Never.
The underlying mechanics are still failing, whether you look at them or not.
Exactly. And by the time you actually take it into the shop, because smoke is literally pouring out of the hood, what could have been a cheap $20 sensor replacement is now a completely blown transmission.
Yeah, it's a massive disaster.
The longer you wait, the more expensive the repair. And workplace friction operates on the exact same principle. We avoid the talk because we lack a plan, and the interpersonal damage simply compounds.
That is a highly functional way to look at it. We lack a plan, so we default to avoidance to protect our own comfort in the short term.
Right, it's self-preservation.
Exactly. So to fix that, the research introduces a core preparation strategy. It's called the SOS framework. It's an acronym that provides a structural roadmap: set up, open, and solve.
SOS. Which is very fitting, considering that is exactly what you want to scream when you are trapped in one of these awkward meetings.
Right. But the SOS framework actually prevents that panic. It gives your brain a sequence to follow. So let's start with the first S, setup.
Okay.
This is about creating the right psychological conditions before you even address the core issue. First, it means securing a private setting.
Yeah, you definitely don't do this at their desk where everyone in the open plan office can hear.
Exactly. You say something like, can we grab a few minutes somewhere quiet? You also give them a degree of control over the timing. Is now okay, or would tomorrow morning be better?
Oh, I like that.
Yeah.
You are giving them a little bit of agency right off the bat so they don't feel cornered.
Precisely. But the most critical mechanism of the setup phase is framing your intent. You need to explicitly state that you're bringing this issue up because you care about the team, the project, or their success.
Right.
You might open by saying, I want to talk about something, and I'm bringing it up because I want this project to succeed, and I value your role in it.
Okay, I have to push back on this a little bit.
Go for it.
Doesn't framing your intent run the massive risk of sounding like corporate fluff?
What do you mean?
Well, if someone sits me down in a sterile conference room and says, I'm telling you this because I care about your success, my brain immediately thinks, oh no, HR handed them a script. Doesn't that fake empathy just set off more alarm bells?
It's a completely valid concern, and honestly, it absolutely will sound hollow if your tone doesn't match your words. You have to mean it. But let's look at the psychology of why framing your intent is so critical.
Okay, I'm listening.
When you pull someone into a sudden meeting and you don't frame your intent, Their brain's default state is threat detection. They assume you are being confrontational. Like I'm the attacker.
Right, and they need to defend their livelihood.
So their defensive walls go up before you've even made your point.
Exactly. Framing your intent acts as a biological override. When you state your intention clearly, you shift the dynamic of the room from being confrontational to being proactive.
I see.
You're essentially telling their amygdala, we were on the same side of the table looking at a shared problem together, rather than, I am sitting across the table judging you. It preemptively lowers those defensive shields because you're clarifying that the end goal is resolution, not punishment.
That makes a lot of sense when you put it in terms of threat detection. You are establishing safety first. All right, so we've got the setup. We are in a quiet room. We've stated our good intentions. The shields are temporarily down.
Yep.
Now we reach the O in SOS, open. And honestly, this is where most of us open our mouths and completely ruin everything.
So true. Because this is where the actual critique happens, and it's where our own frustration usually leaks out. Here's where it gets really interesting. The research lays out what I would call the golden rule of difficult conversations. It is a fundamental distinction that completely changes how you communicate. And if you get this wrong, the conversation is over.
The golden rule is this. You must describe behavior, not character.
Behavior, not character. Let's break that down. If you're sitting in that room and you're frustrated, your instinct is going to be to attack the person's character, mostly because it just feels cathartic.
Yes. When we are annoyed, we naturally use generalities to define the person. We say things like, you're always late, or you have a terrible attitude lately.
Which is basically saying you are fundamentally flawed as a human being.
And the moment you attack someone's character, they completely stop listening to your feedback. They are no longer processing your words. They are solely focused on defending their identity.
Wow.
The effective way to handle this is to keep it strictly behavioral. Instead of saying you're always late, you say, you've been late to 3 of our last 5 team meetings.
The difference in how that lands is night and day. One is an insult. The other is a verifiable data point.
Exactly. Take the bad attitude example. If you say, you have a bad attitude, you've lost them. They will argue that they don't.
Of course they will.
But if you say, in Tuesday's meeting, you interrupted twice and rolled your eyes while your colleague was presenting, that affected the room's dynamic.
Right.
You are now describing a specific, observable action and the concrete impact it had.
It reminds me so much of reviewing a movie. Like if I tell you I didn't like a movie and I just say, the director is a total hack who hates cinema, that is a character attack.
Yeah, and not very helpful.
Right. It's hostile, and it gives the director zero information on how to improve. Yeah. But if I say, the pacing in the second act was really slow, and that specific plot hole with a timeline broke my immersion, that is a behavioral critique.
That's a great way to think about it.
It points to a specific mechanical flaw that can actually be addressed. The goal here is to keep the conversation accountable to specific actions, not judging their soul.
And what's fascinating here is how removing the character attack completely neutralizes the ego threat for the person receiving the feedback.
How so?
Well, when you just state the facts, the observable behavior, they cannot argue with the reality of what happened. They can't legitimately say, no, I didn't roll my eyes if they actually did and everyone saw it.
Right, because it's a fact.
But they can endlessly, fiercely argue with the subjective label of a bad attitude.
Okay, so we've got the theory down, we have our setup, we know the golden rule of behavior over character. But how does this framework actually hold up in the real world? Because every workplace crisis feels uniquely complicated.
They do.
The communication guide we're looking at maps out 4 distinct minefields, 4 common types of difficult conversations. Let's look at how we adapt this framework for each one.
So the first type is the performance issue. This is when someone's actual work output is slipping. Again, the instinct is to use a vague character attack like, your work hasn't been good lately. But we know that triggers defensiveness. Instead, the framework suggests this precise phrasing.
Let's hear it.
The last 3 deliverables came in after the agreed deadline. I want to understand what's affecting the timeline.
Wait, I have a question about that phrasing.
Sure?
If I know an employee is just procrastinating or scrolling on their phone, isn't asking what's affecting the timeline just handing them a golden invitation to make up an excuse? Aren't I letting them off the hook?
It might feel that way, but you're actually doing the opposite. By presenting the behavioral data, the 3 late deliverables, and asking what's affecting the timeline, you are forcing them to solve a puzzle with you.
Oh, I see.
If they're just procrastinating, they won't have a good structural answer for what's affecting the timeline. It forces them to either admit fault or realize they have no valid excuse without you having to act like a courtroom prosecutor. It demands data, not just an apology.
Ah, that makes sense. You're
Yeah.
shifting the burden of explanation onto them. That was really smart. Okay, the second minefield identified is the behavior or attitude issue.
Mm?
This is the hardest one for people because it feels inherently personal. It's the eye roller from the earlier example.
Yes, and the formula here requires addressing it directly to show respect, focusing strictly on the behavior and explaining the impact.
What's the phrasing for that?
You might say, I want to bring something to your attention directly because I respect our working relationship. In yesterday's meeting, when you did X, it came across a certain way. That might not have been your intention, but it affected the team dynamic.
Giving them the out of "that might not have been your intention" is brilliant. It allows them to save a little bit of face and keeps their ego intact while still holding them completely accountable for the ripple effect of their actions.
Exactly. It de-escalates before they can even get mad.
But it's one thing to address individual performance or attitude. What happens when you aren't the target of the behavior? How does this framework hold up for minefield number 3, colleague conflict? Like when two of your team members are at each other's throats.
As a manager or a peer mediator, your immediate instinct is usually to play judge and jury. You want to hear the arguments and declare a winner.
Right, you want to fix it.
But the framework strictly advises against this. You hear both parties separately to understand the behavioral data, and then you bring them together with this specific framing.
Okay.
I've heard from both of you about this situation. I want us to talk together, not to assign blame, but to figure out how we can work together better moving forward.
Not to assign blame.
Yeah.
You are literally disarming them before they can start pointing fingers at each other. You're setting the boundary that the past is the past, and we are only talking about the future.
Exactly. And finally, we reach the 4th type, delivering bad news.
The toughest one.
Yeah. This could be a major project cancellation, denying a promotion, or the heaviest conversation you can have, a layoff.
Right, and in these moments, people almost always try to soften the blow with corporate jargon. Or they talk in circles to delay getting to the point.
Which just prolongs the agony and creates confusion.
Yeah, it's agonizing.
The key mechanism here is direct honesty followed by presence. The guide recommends starting clearly. I have some news I want to share with you directly because you deserve to hear it from me first.
Clean and direct.
And then state the news cleanly. This isn't the outcome we wanted, and the decision has been made to terminate your position. But the most crucial part is what comes next.
Right, the guide strongly emphasizes giving them space. You literally say, I want to give you space to process this, and I'm here to answer any questions. But I want to dig into the why behind that space. This isn't just about being polite, right?
Not at all. It's rooted in biology. When someone hears devastating news that threatens their livelihood, they experience cognitive shock. Their amygdala fires, and their prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for logical processing, temporarily goes offline.
So they aren't even really hearing you.
They literally cannot process whatever corporate logic or severance details you are explaining to them in that moment. Silence isn't just a courtesy. Giving them a few minutes of quiet to process the shock is a biological necessity.
That is incredibly revealing. You aren't rushing them out the door because it's awkward for you. You are sitting in the discomfort with them until their brain comes back online.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, all 4 of these scenarios, performance, attitude, conflict, and bad news, they all require the exact same underlying skill.
Which is?
You are giving the other person the space, the behavioral clarity, and the respect to maintain their dignity. Even when you are firing someone, you can do it in a way that preserves their dignity.
Dignity. That really is the magic word that threads all of this together.
Yeah.
But let's look at the reality of human nature. We just talked about emotions spiking during layoffs. But sometimes humans snap even over minor feedback. You can use the perfect setup, you can focus flawlessly on behavior, you can preserve their dignity, and the other person might still absolutely lose it.
Oh, absolutely.
They might get furious or start crying or vehemently push back.
Of course. Humans are unpredictable, and anytime professional identities are scrutinized, emotions can run hot.
So what do you do when the perfect structural script fails? How do you de-escalate? Let's talk about the words that actually pour gasoline on that emotional fire. The
Yes.
guide includes a language to avoid list, and I have to admit, I read through this and realized I use some of these phrases all the time.
Most of us do, usually because we are nervous and reaching for filler words.
Exactly. For example, I don't mean to be harsh, but or no offense, but thinking I'm softening the blow for the other person. Why does the research say that is such a bad idea?
Because it acts like a spam filter in the brain. The moment they hear, no offense, but their brain categorizes whatever you say next as a threat and routes it straight to the trash.
Wow.
You are essentially telling them to prepare for an insult. You never follow no offense, but with a genuine compliment.
That's so true. No offense, but you're doing a great job. Said no one ever.
Exactly. It signals that an attack is imminent, which instantly raises the defensive shields you work so hard to lower during the setup phase.
It totally defeats the purpose of the setup. Another one on the toxic list is the phrase, everyone feels this way, or people have been saying.
That approach is incredibly damaging.
Why is that?
When you say everyone feels this way, you are forcing one person to bear the weight of an anonymous group. It's cowardly.
Oof.
You are weaponizing office gossip instead of taking ownership of your own feedback as a leader. It makes the person feel paranoid and entirely isolated. You must speak only for yourself and what you have directly observed.
Wow. Paranoid and isolated. That is exactly how that would feel. Then there's the use of absolutes, like you always or you never.
As we discussed with the golden rule, absolutes invite technical arguments. If you say you never send the reports on time and they sent it on time exactly once 3 years ago, their brain will latch on to that one instance.
Just to prove you wrong.
Exactly. They use it to invalidate your entire argument. You've given them a loophole to escape accountability.
And finally, the ultimatum. This is the last time I'm going to say this, or if this doesn't change immediately.
An ultimatum used prematurely completely damages the working relationship before a collaborative solution is even explored. It threatens escalation and power dynamics instead of seeking a mutual resolution.
So what does this all mean? When I look at this toxic language list, it tells me that our default unthinking language, the little filler phrases we reach for when we are nervous about the conflict, they actually trigger the exact explosive reaction we are so desperately trying to avoid.
Yep.
We are engineering our own nightmares.
We really are, which is why internalizing the SOS framework is so vital. It replaces your nervous, unthinking language with deliberate, functional language.
Okay, so we've survived the pushback. We navigated the emotional minefield without using toxic language. Now we are at the end of the meeting. This brings us to the final S in SOS, solve.
The most important part.
How do you actually end this conversation so that real, tangible change happens? Because I've definitely had these talks, felt great about them, and then absolutely nothing changed the next day.
That happens because people fail to stick the landing. The solve phase is about locking in a behavioral resolution. You cannot leave the room with a vague promise to do better.
Right.
Do better isn't a metric.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The framework details 3 specific closing strategies. First, you must confirm the decision verbally. You literally say, so just to summarize, make sure we're on the same page, and then restate the exact agreement.
Okay.
Going forward, we're agreeing to implement this specific checklist. Is that fair? You are forcing them to give verbal confirmation to prevent any strategic misunderstanding later on.
Exactly. Second, you end on a human note. You bookend the meeting by reminding them of the framing intent you used at the very beginning. I want to be clear, this conversation happened because I want things to work out, and I appreciate you talking through it with me.
You bring it back to the relationship, repairing any slight fraying that happened during the critique. And the third strategy.
You need to know what to do if the conversation completely fails.
Which happens.
It does. If it went off the rails, emotions got too high, and no agreement was reached, you don't force a resolution. You pause and say, I can see this didn't land the way I hoped, and we aren't making progress today. Can we pick this up again tomorrow after we've both had time to think about it?
You leave the door open, but you stop the bleeding.
Yes.
Let's tie all of these mechanics together. There's a real-world case study in the communication guide that I think illustrates this perfectly.
I love this example.
It features a manager named Morgan and an employee named Taylor. Morgan is dealing with Taylor consistently turning in late work. Let's kind of role-play how this looks in practice.
This case study perfectly highlights the power of the solve phase. Okay, I'll analyze. You take Morgan.
Sounds good. So Morgan does the setup perfectly. Private room. Morgan frames the intent. I want to bring something up And I want to be direct because I value your work here.
Great setup.
Then Morgan opens, focusing purely on behavioral data. The proposal for the Henderson account came in 2 days late and the client noticed. This is the second time in a month. I want to understand what's affecting the timeline.
Perfect execution. No character attacks, just the reality of the timeline.
But here is where it gets real.
That's-
Taylor pushes back, and there's clear emotion.
Right.
Taylor gets defensive and says, I've been incredibly stretched. I am literally covering the workload for 2 people right now because of the hiring freeze. Now, my instinct as a stress manager would be to say, everyone is busy. That's no excuse for missing a client deadline.
Which would instantly invalidate Taylor's experience and escalate the conflict.
Exactly. But Morgan doesn't do that. Morgan validates the context without necessarily excusing the behavior.
Yes.
Morgan says, I hear you. I actually wasn't aware of the full picture regarding the workload. That is highly useful context. And then Morgan pivots straight to collaboration, the solve phase. What would help you deliver on time even when you're stretched? And what do I need to do on my side to support that?
It's brilliant.
Wait, does that mean Morgan just backs down and lets the late work slide?
No, the standard remains the same. The work cannot be late. But the accountability shifts from being a one-way demand to a two-way collaboration. By asking, what do I need to do on my side? Morgan is acknowledging that leadership plays a role in employee performance.
And they actually reach a functional resolution. Taylor asks to be able to communicate risk factors earlier in the week, and Morgan agrees to prioritize tasks so Taylor isn't overextended.
This raises an important question.
What's that?
How often do we, as managers or colleagues, quietly punish people for poor performance or a bad attitude when the real underlying issue is just a total lack of structural context and open communication?
Wow.
Morgan could have just written Taylor up for being late, assumed Taylor was lazy, and walked away. Instead, Morgan initiated the difficult conversation, discovered a massive resource bottleneck on the team, and actually fixed the underlying engine problem.
It completely reframes the purpose of these talks from punishment to discovery.
Exactly.
All right, let's recap our journey today.
Right.
We started with that universal feeling of dread, that fear of conflict, but the mechanics we explored showed that you can actually control these moments.
You really can.
You cannot control the other person's emotional reaction, but you absolutely can control your setup. You can control your strict focus on behavioral data over character attacks, ensuring you are reviewing the movie, not attacking the director.
Yeah.
And you can control your commitment to locking in a collaborative solution.
And I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over. We've spent this entire time talking about how to effectively critique an employee or a colleague. But if you look closely at these scripts, they demand absolute clarity and boundary setting from the person leading the conversation.
That's true. It requires you to be incredibly direct.
Right. So if you are absolutely terrified of having these conversations, if you are going out of your way to avoid them, the question you need to ask yourself isn't, what's wrong with my team?
What is it?
The real question you need to explore is, why is my own leadership style so reliant on everyone simply reading my mind? If you aren't communicating the behavioral standard, you can't be surprised when people fail to meet it.
Wow. Are you relying on mind reading as a leadership style? That is a sharp pivot and incredibly true because, going back to where we started, that check engine light is never going to turn itself off. Ignoring it only guarantees a much more spectacular breakdown down the road. But if you pop the hood, look at the actual behavioral mechanics of the problem, and use the tools we discussed today, you can fix the engine before the whole thing falls apart. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Take these tools, take a deep breath, and go have that conversation you've been putting off. You've got this.